Madeline, and it is so nice to meet you. Welcome to the 70th Celebrity Synastry chart reading, where we will be looking into Victoria Beckham and David Beckham. For those new and returning, I take notes on a synastry chart looking at the personal planet signs aspects and birth times available house overlays. I also add my insights and interpretations along the way. Feel free to leave your own in the comments below. Before we start the reading, give this video a like and subscribe for more celebrity synastry chart readings. Let's get into it. Starting off with the Sun, we have David's Sun in Taurus and Victoria's Sun in Aries. They approach life differently and they need to learn to live with each other. Difficult for them to understand each other, and David has the tendency to prove himself to Victoria. This is an interesting start, potentially because I do believe they do come from very different backgrounds in terms of class, posh spice and everything. I don't believe David Beckham came from that same background, so potentially there is that sort of like lifestyle adjustment they may need to make to each other. Even though they are both quite affluent, I believe when they did meet, they were very affluent, but potentially they may have had developed habits that were very different, so that's there. David's Sun overlaid in Victoria's 11th house. It's a friendly atmosphere, they accept their differences and flaws. The relationship begins as them being friends. David sees Victoria as someone he can spend time with. Victoria's Sun overlaid in David's 12th house. They are different people and there is an atmosphere of mystery. They don't understand each other and they have no idea why they are together. That's kind of interesting. Like, if their relationship did begin with them being friends, maybe they kind of just fell into them being in a relationship and that's why they're not sure, but we'll see more hopefully. Victoria finds David unpredictable and Victoria sees David as exotic and strange. Victoria feels David doesn't approve of her and relationship requires a lot of patience. So yeah, thus far that seems to be a big element. Patience and adjusting to each other. Victoria is attracted to David against her judgment. Interesting. David's Sun sextile Victoria's Venus. They really love each other and Victoria boosts David's ego, which I think is nice considering, like, if David has the tendency to prove himself to Victoria, it's nice that it's paid off in a way, if that makes sense. David feels adored by Victoria and they both have a desire for cooperation and harmony. I'm glad it seems like they do have a good foundation and like at least like a willingness to, have that patience and adjustment to each other. David's Sun sextile Victoria's Jupiter. David energizes Victoria and they are good travel companions, which I imagine would have been helpful because I believe they did like travel quite a lot with their, respective careers. So that's good. They both want to make the other happy and Victoria opens up new doors for David. Potentially, I assume in things like fashion and stuff like that, because they both have become, in a way, like fashion icons, just very, like, iconic people in general, and known for their sort of, like, aura and aesthetic. Victoria boosts David's confidence, we're seeing again. Victoria frequently gives David the benefit of the doubt. Victoria is generous with David, and mutual respect remains after the end. Oh no, that's no. Victoria's Sun square David's Moon. There's basic misunderstandings and practical disagreements occur, so I guess like going back to like them approaching life differently and all of that. There's general discontent and David sees Victoria as too rational and selfish. Victoria sees David as too sensitive and David may feel resentful towards Victoria over time. I don't like this. Victoria's Sun opposite David's Uranus. Separation occurs and it's an exciting relationship. I assume, going back to the whole traveling thing and everything, especially in the beginning of the relationship, I can imagine where they didn't have kids to necessarily force them or like make them compromise with each other, if that makes sense. Relationship starts quickly. I wonder how they met, like the whole, like they potentially met through friends and they're sort of confused why they are together in the first place. Victoria finds David to be insensitive. Interesting. So there seems to be a bit of conflict with that whole sensitive thing in terms of Victoria viewing David. Potentially we will see more. Hopefully we will. Victoria feels burdened and David will likely feel trapped by Victoria over time. I don't like David over time feeling, I guess, not as great in their relationship. That worries me. So now it's time for the moon. We have David's moon in Capricorn and Victoria's moon in Aquarius. Emotional needs are contrasting, and David may not appreciate Victoria's free spirit. I assume this will be relating to her independence, but that's there. Both have a hard time expressing emotions, and Victoria is not sympathetic to David's views. I don't like this. And the fact that these are potentially a conflict here. David's moon overlaid in Victoria's 8th house. Victoria can go deep into David's psyche, and Victoria can awaken David's inner demons. I don't like that. I mean, it's not bad, but it's also not, like, superior, is it? David will desire things in this relationship that are taboo, and they have a deep connection. It's an emotionally nurturing relationship, so we did see, like, yeah, their emotional needs are contrasting, but I feel like the fact that both of them have a hard time expressing emotions, potentially neither of them are, like, very emotional as people, that could be, in a way, emotionally nurturing, if that, in a sort of, like, backwards way. The fact that they're not nurturing each other so emotionally could be good for them, you know? Possibility for them to come back after a separation. This is interesting. Okay. I wonder if they were, like, on and off at one point, because we're seeing, like, the whole deterioration with David, and also this now. It's very interesting. And I think because we did see, like, the mutual respect remaining after the end, potentially, like, they were on a good term where they were, like, going off. So that is why it was potential for them to come back after they separated for a bit. This is interesting. Desire for the other is never satiated. Victoria's moon overlaid in David's 11th house. Victoria sees David as the dream person, and Victoria feels at ease around David. Potentially, we did see, and we are seeing, she seems to, like, really like him and admire him. David feels relaxed around Victoria, and both feel they can be themselves, and they are never really mad at each other. I am liking, they do seem to have a lot of, like, softening aspects. Like, we did see, like, there seems to be conflict in some areas, but we have seen a lot of, like, softening factors as well, which is nice. David's moon is square Victoria's Uranus. David is possessive of Victoria, and the relationship can begin suddenly. We keep seeing this relationship beginning suddenly and everything. I'm very curious how they actually met. David feels emotionally insecure around Victoria. David's moon trine Victoria's Pluto. It's an intense meeting. So yeah, it seems like it's like an intense meeting. Very sudden, whatever happened. And also potentially beginning as friends. We saw that earlier as well. So I'll be very curious to see how they met. Both will need to let go of fake personas, and they have a strong bond, which I feel like is important, especially if you are in the limelight. I believe when they did meet, they were both, like, already famous. So that would definitely be important. Both bring truth and change in social and political areas together. I'm not sure if they do anything public together, maybe something for charity-wise or some social humanitarian issues potentially. Involved in organizations together, and they can solve problems in their community. They can go through difficulties together, and they both can transform each other, which I feel like is very important, especially since I believe that they both were quite scrutinized in the media and everything, especially at their peak. So I can imagine that would be very helpful, that they have that ability to go through those difficulties together.
Now for the intermission. This video is brought to you by me, my Etsy store, Adeline the Astrologer. If you ever watch this and think, hey, I would like her to read my Synastry chart, well, I will. I do personalized Synastry chart readings on my Etsy store. I do both basic and detailed ones. The basic ones are a bit more simple to understand and really good for those just beginning out in astrology, getting their heads around it, or just as a fun gift idea. The detailed readings are very similar to what I do here, so it's a lot of it just with my insights and interpretation on the chart. So if you're interested in that and everything else, astrology and tarot, readings and gifts, definitely check out my Etsy store for that. I'm always releasing new other things there as well. And you can even just favorite the store just to support me for free. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to the reading.
Victoria's moon square David's Mercury. It's emotionally challenging. I assume this will be on David's end. Victoria has a hard time getting David to listen. Maybe this is where she sees him as a bit like that combination of both being insensitive and sensitive. Maybe he is sensitive to certain things, and then when it comes to maybe her feelings, she feels he could tend to be a bit insensitive. Victoria feels David doesn't value her opinions or respect her intellectually. That's not great. David feels Victoria is too sensitive to criticism. Yeah, so they both seem to see each other as a bit more sensitive, which is Both need to learn to listen, and David feels frustrated with Victoria. Victoria's moon trine David's Venus, mutual appreciation, and it is easy to compromise. Very nice, because as I said, they need to have those softening factors, I feel like, especially since they did last for so long and they have been together for so long. You have to have those softening factors like compromise and everything. There's natural affection and they're supportive of each other during conflict. That is really nice. Like, they can go through difficulties together and that conflict and everything. That, I really appreciate that. And I'm sure is why they would potentially have a really strong bond. They appreciate art together and they are a social couple, definitely. Victoria's moon trine David's Uranus. They both feel free to express themselves. I believe we are seeing again. David is more open around Victoria, and ideas of unconventional domestic setup bring them together. I believe, weren't they touring or something when, like, they had their first child? I believe that was something there, and, like, the whole traveling thing, they moved around a bit. So that is there. They can cope with sudden changes together, and there is a level of unpredictability. I really appreciate this, and I see what they appreciate about the other, because this is something that keeps coming up, sort of like dealing with conflict together, sudden change, and all of that. I can imagine this is what really glues them together, because they have gone through a very, like, unique relationship together, being very, like, out in the public and all of that, especially at the time, like, at their peak and everything. So I can imagine that is what really glues them together. Despite all of the issues, they have gone through a very specific situation that only they two can understand, if that makes sense. David feels safe around Victoria and they enjoy talking about social issues, so that seems to be a thing here. Mutual friends may bring them together. So maybe the whole friend thing, either they were in similar social circles or, like, the friends just brought them together. So now it's time for Mercury. We have David's Mercury in Taurus and Victoria's Mercury in Aries. David encourages Victoria to focus on physical aspects of life, and Victoria resents David for his criticism. It is interesting, we did just see that David feels that Victoria's too sensitive to criticism, which is funny. David sees Victoria as impractical, and Victoria sees David as someone with no vision. Yikes. They help each other with their strengths. David's Mercury overlaid in Victoria's 11th house. David is open and communicative with Victoria, which is nice. He seems to feel, like, quite open and, like, able to be himself around Victoria, which is very nice. Victoria finds David pleasant, and Victoria looks forward to spending time with David. I believe we saw this on David's end early, so it's nice that they enjoy spending time together. Both are tolerant and patient with each other, which is very well needed. Victoria's Mercury overlaid in David's 12th house. Victoria has a sixth sense with David, and Victoria may feel overwhelmed around David. David may feel violated, and this can easily become a paranoid relationship. Their intuition is strong together. Victoria's Mercury conjunct David's Jupiter. David introduces Victoria to lucky connections, so I'm not sure where it would be, actually. Like, I'm sure both of them would have their own individual connections. It is just, like, I guess in the beginning, David was more into the whole sports thing, but I imagine, like, as, like, time has gone by and, like, they both have, like, retired from their original careers, that they would have had made new connections that they can help each other with. It's a relationship of learning, and David encourages Victoria to expand her horizons. Traveling strengthens their relationship, which I find nice, and I think it goes back to, I feel like, the whole, like, unpredictability, the whole traveling thing, the whole, like, they have a very unique set of circumstances together, especially in the beginning of the relationship, when it was, like, at its peak, so to speak. So stands that this would strengthen their relationship. Victoria helps David be practical, so, I mean, we did see, like, David encouraging Victoria to be more practical, focus on those physical things. I assume they would just help each other be practical in different ways. David feels his thinking is valued by Victoria, so it's interesting. It seems like On an intellectual front, David feels very satisfied. Victoria, not so much, because we did see she doesn't feel her thinking is very valued. But emotionally, it seems like, we haven't seen a lot from Victoria. But I guess that lack of satisfaction, it would ultimately be satisfactory because it seems like neither of them are super duper emotional. But it seems like David does have a bit of like lack of satisfaction in that area, as we saw before. They have a strong intellectual bond and it's a favorable business partnership. Have they ever created a business together? I know as individuals they have their own little projects. Have they ever done anything together though? I'm curious. Victorious Mercury square David Saturn. Deep respect for the other's intelligence. It seems like this is more on Victoria. Victoria feels inferior to David. Yeah, like I feel like intellectually it seems to be that way. Victoria can be intimidated by David's practicality. Okay, so he seems to have something on her when it comes to practicality and practical matters. Serious tone in conversation, and both question their role in the relationship. This is interesting because we saw before, like, they have no idea why they are in the relationship to begin with. So it's very interesting that they're sort of like questioning why they are in the relationship. Negativity and criticism take over conversation. I don't like this. Victoria's Mercury's trine David's Neptune. David inspires Victoria's imagination. I wonder because, they were married when she started doing the whole, I believe they were married, I'm pretty sure they were, when she started all of her more like fashion endeavors and everything. And we did see that he encourages her to expand her horizons. I wonder, and now inspiring her imagination, I wonder if he potentially like pushed her to do that, inspired her to do that in any way. They share an appreciation for the arts and they get each other and they are forgiving of each other. I mean, yeah, they would have to be. Victoria's Mercury opposite David's Pluto. They challenge each other to think more deeply, and intensity can be too much, which I believe we did see earlier. I believe one of them felt a bit like overwhelmed and paranoid by this relationship. And I think also on like a more like realistic front, I feel like their relationship, I keep saying this, like at their peak, it was very intense, which is true. Issues can stick for too long, and Victoria feels David pushes his beliefs onto her. Maybe that is why she feels that he doesn't respect her intellectually. Victoria may feel limited by David, and David may be demanding of Victoria's secrets. It's kind of funny. That pun, not intended, but that is there. So now it's time for Venus. So we have David's Venus in Gemini and Victoria's Venus in Pisces. These are both mutable signs. Attracted to their differences, for better or worse, I guess. Share simple approaches to life, which I think this is nice because we did see in the beginning there is that sort of conflict with lifestyles, as I said, potentially with class, but I feel like it's nice. It seems like ultimately they do live a more simple life together and have their simple values. Inconsistent but forgiving relationship. Yeah, I think that summarizes this whole relationship, doesn't it? They meet each other's needs, and David has a hard time understanding Victoria. Maybe that is why he doesn't, like, maybe she doesn't feel as, like, intellectually respected. It is just because David doesn't understand her side, maybe. David's Venus overlaid in Victoria's 12th house. David is deeply moved by Victoria, and David is needy and vulnerable around Victoria. Interesting. David acts different in this relationship, and Victoria doesn't understand David. Why? They don't seem to understand each other very well. I don't like how we keep seeing this. Victoria feels David is too good to be true, going back to how she sees him as the dream person. Victoria feels insecure in this relationship. Yeah, we do keep seeing she feels a bit inferior to David. David tries to hold on to this relationship. Interesting. Maybe if they did have the on and off period like we potentially saw in the beginning, maybe he was the one that kept trying to get back together. Victoria's Venus overlaid in David's 11th house. Victoria immediately likes David and they are comfortable with each other. We're seeing again the whole comfortable thing. David senses he can be himself around Victoria and they are good friends, so maybe they did start as friends. Both share the same social activities and hobbies, and they both open with the other. David's Venus trine Victoria's Uranus. Their relationship seems odd to outsiders. I mean, there was a lot of public opinion about the relationship, that's for sure. They enjoy experimenting together and they share unusual interests. It's an unconventional setup. Definitely with like how things were in the beginning. I keep repeating myself, but like it's, it is in unconventional way. I feel like now like they have sort of settled down in a way. I don't believe they are moving around as much and everything, so it's not long term, and David is drawn to Victoria's unique qualities. There's an element of fate, and Victoria finds David charming and attractive. I also missed, did we see that it wasn't long term? I don't like that. I mean, obviously, because they've been together for so long, but I feel like it kind of does further emphasize, I feel like potentially there may have been an on and off dynamic to this at some point. Victoria's Venus conjunct David's Mars. The intensity does not fade, so I assume we did see before, like the desire for each other is never satiated, so I assume that's where it comes from. It's just always intense with these two. They will always remember each other, and they have petty arguments, and they know how to push each other's buttons. So I assume maybe like all of the sort of like little conflicts in this relationship is just more on the petty side. I hope so. Victoria attracts David with her charm. So they both seem to see each other as charming. Like we just saw that, Victoria finds David charming and attractive. And if, Victoria is pulling David with her charm, that's also there. Victoria's Venus trine David's Saturn. David stabilizes Victoria's emotions, so maybe that is why she, in this relationship, doesn't feel as emotional, maybe. There's strong commitment, that's for sure. They sacrifice for each other. I'm sure they would have at some point. Like, come on. They see the relationship as everlasting. That's nice. Like, there seems to be elements of longevity, like, in terms of there's very unique things that pull them together and bond them together, and there's a lot of forgiveness as well. They help each other in career, and Victoria admires David's strength. Victoria's Venus squared David's Neptune. Victoria needs to make sure she falls for the real David, not her illusion. This is interesting considering that she seems to feel quite inferior to him, and she seems to see him as the dream person and everything. So, yeah, there definitely seems to be a thing where Victoria needs to, like, really not focus on her illusion, I guess you could say. They have extremes of trusting, and David needs to be careful to keep promises and not make huge ones. David has a hard time dealing with Victoria because she doesn't want to see reality. Going back to how we did see a couple times in this reading that he tends to feel frustrated with her. So now it's time for Mars. We have David's Mars in Pisces and Victoria's Mars in Gemini. These are both mutable signs. It's a fluctuating relationship. Yeah, we keep seeing that. Yeah. Victoria may hurt David. I assume maybe emotionally. I don't know what else besides the general discontent. Is that the right word? There generally seems to be. I don't feel like this is a super easy relationship. Is my point. David feels inferior to Victoria, which we did see in the beginning. I'm not super obsessed that they seem to both feel quite inferior to each other. David is willing to please Victoria, which we did see in the beginning, which seems to go appreciated by Victoria, which is nice. Victoria sees David as too passive. David's Mars overlaid in Victoria's 10th house. David brings out Victoria's competitive side. There's a cold and detached chemistry. I'm not obsessed with that. Neither know what they want from the other. This is very strange. I don't know if we have seen this from other relationships. As far as I remember, I don't think so. This just deep, like, why are they together? Like, this keeps coming up in this reading, and I'm not obsessed with it. And honestly, if that is the case, I'm kind of surprised they have lasted as long as they did. David wants to impress Victoria, and David seems uninterested in Victoria to outsiders. That's awkward. Victoria tends to put her walls up with David. Maybe that is where the emotional, I guess, like, why she feels emotionally, like, less emotional around David and her emotions are stabilized. Maybe that is actually her just putting walls up around David. Victoria both craves and fears David's stability. That's big yikes. The relationship seems intense to outsiders. Yeah. Victoria's Mars overlaid in David's 2nd house. Victoria triggers David's possessiveness, and David is more materialistic in this relationship. I wonder because, I mean, we did see in the beginning lifestyle changes and the whole, like, class thing. I believe, like, I mean, I assume Victoria posh spice, she's a bit more posh. So maybe that is how David becomes more materialistic in the relationship. Victoria is patient with David and sentimental with David as well, which I feel is really needed. Like, they need as many softening factors as they can. Victoria treats David as an object, and David tends to be more masculine in this relationship. Victoria's Mars trine David's Uranus. Victoria feels free around David, and they have an unusual meeting. What is this meeting? It's just a very unique meeting, it seems like. They respect each other's independence, which is great. Victoria is not a fan of David's lack of boundaries. Okay, so that was the final aspect, bringing us to the end of the reading. If you are still watching, please share your thoughts below. I'll be very curious to see what you guys have to say about this one. Definitely an interesting reading, and I guess not what I expected going into this reading, considering what we know about these two publicly. If you have made it this far, please consider subscribing for more. I post these readings weekly. And besides that, give this video a like, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!